Brilliant. So here we are again. So last time we were talking about mental health, we were talking about how we got here. You took us through a little of the history and Freud and dreams and all the other stuff. Quite a lot.
As much as I know, but
quite a lot more about that. And I think, you know, we said at the start of last time, it's worth reiterating that today, that we come at this with, you've done some sort of work on this in your terms of your masters. We've got some sort of practical experience of dealing with individuals with different levels of challenge, but we're not medical professionals, and we're not trying to claim that we are. It's just kind of trying to think through how do we respond to whether it's helpful to call it a mental health crisis, but we're all recognising that there's a greater awareness, a greater prevalence, however you want to describe it, of mental health conditions. It's weird because you're almost putting inverted commas around the word as you say it, because, and this is what we were talking about last time, is that a broken arm is a broken arm, but mental health is a lot more difficult to define.
Yeah.
So we talked about how do we get here. So I think our question is, where is here? Where are we then with all this?
Yeah, and and you see people's feedback as to how this is going. It is complex. It's complex because we are complex.
Yes.
You know, any amount of.
So one thing about last episode that people, if they've heard it, will notice is that we didn't say phones, Instagram, young people. Yeah. It's all brand new, and it's
here's a cylinder solution that if we just did this, everything will all go away. Yeah, go on.
And you talk about, back in the day, they talk about nerve. Someone had issues with their nerves, or whatever, or they were just
I think of Mrs. Bennett immediately from Pride and Prejudice, but. Carry on.
Yeah, and it is complicated, and it's complicated in how, to use a term, how contagious the issue is, and this is to some degree known that that if there's a suicide that takes place and you decide to advertise suicide helplines, on the whole you tend to see an increase in suicides rather than a decrease. Because you get this idea, and child who's had a parent who's done that are in increased chance of doing it themselves, and you see this a way that of human behaviour that we copy. Even then, when you have conversations with people, they don't. You know, you talk to a child and there's a lot of pain, and they don't like what their parent did, and obviously that's incredibly painful. But it appears to then, when people then hit a point, it can become the pattern.
So you're talking about something different than the sense that, okay, I speak to a friend and they said, I just had a diagnosis for ADHD. I said, what's that? And they describe it, and I sit there thinking, maybe I need to go to the doctor. You're not just talking about that sense that you're not talking about the awareness thing where, actually, we've got a growing awareness of this, therefore more people are getting the right diagnosis. You're talking more about how something happening and describing something actually creates the conditions for it to happen more.
Well, group dynamics, and the way group dynamics operate and work, and it is complex, and it's not like one for one. It's like it's not because your friend. Yeah, I'm not saying that's what you were saying, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's certainly a once you get a set of human emotions and you put them, human experiences, and you put together and you label them, that becomes a very powerful thing. And understanding how you differentiate that, and understanding like all these language that we're all talking about and people have all heard are quite complex medical terms.
Yeah.
But have become used in today's culture.
Yeah. And not necessarily used for the exact same thing or alongside as many.
Yeah, understood with the caveats.
And here we're back in the broken arm again, aren't we? To continue to use that analogy. If I go into school with a cast on and say I've broken my arm, I'm probably communicating 95% of the information that people need to know about it.
Yes.
Whereas if I go into school and say I've just been dead, what am I communicating? And what are other people going to understand from what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, for example, one of them, the changes that you see is, I think this is right, that historically you had anxiety, depression. They were the same thing. You got diagnosed with one because it was viewed that it was basically the same side of the different side of the same coin. That then split up, and so you hear people, go, I've got depression, I've got anxiety, I've got, and so there are changes, and one of the big ones that was recently changed was how many symptoms over a period of time that you needed to have to be diagnosed with ADHD.
Right, so by recently changed, we're back to the diagnostic manuals we talked about last time, so whether the that American Association or the WHO.
The DSM, what's called the DSM-5 is the latest.
Right, so
the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Okay, so DSM-5 says we're now defining autism by, I don't know what the number is. Previously you needed 12 of these 20, now you need 7. Those are not the numbers, but that's what
something like that, yeah. I know that more for ADHD. I don't know if that's the case for anxiety. For autism, but I know it changed.
Yeah.
And the big positive there is that some people who would have been cut off from a certain set of help can now get it. And the maybe negative side is that everyone maybe sees a bigger number of people with a label if they're told it's a problem and goes, it's getting worse, whatever. So there's...
Yes, and so for example, the example in autism was that autism was typically a lot associated with having problems socially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that changed because it was seen typically that was a male issue and not as much a female
so there's
issue.
been there's been a massive rise in the diagnosis of female autism in the last 5 years. Some people partly because I think that male autism, sadly, the reason the diagnosis seems to have come essentially from problematic social behaviour. So if you've got someone who can't, classically, and this is a massive oversimplification, I know, but the classic picture of someone is someone who's brilliant, talented, brain the size of a planet, but can't communicate effectively and becomes violent. That's always an oversimplification, but of course, the model of that is a boy.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit like you kind of tend to find what you're looking for.
Yeah. Teachers certainly will say that it's much harder to understand or diagnose some of these things in girls because they do just behave differently. Maybe they're less straightforward in the voice, who knows? But it's not unusual in medicine, is it, for women to be understood much later and less well, sadly. Just
because most of the model are male models.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and you still then are left with somewhat of a question of, and if the diagnosis is contested, so much more contested is the so what. So even if we agree on this is also, what does that mean? What should we do about that? How much should you tell someone? Not tell someone? What does the label do and mean? And that's
whose responsibility is it to do it? Again, to go back to the broken arm, the doctor puts the cast on. I go to school, but I'm careful for 6 weeks. The cast goes off and fixed. Everybody knows their role.
Yes, and
autism or ADHD, who is responsible for all this?
Well, and that's also, again, you tied into the complexity of it, and the complexity of to what extent we are all in control of our behaviour and all in control of our ability to stop doing the things that we really want to stop.
Or just hiding them.
Yeah. Or, manifesting them in a culturally acceptable...
More socially acceptable, yeah.
And it's all culturally... It is culturally held. You give a diagnosis to someone in a certain environment, it could be very helpful. You give them that diagnosis in another environment, it's completely the opposite, and they get demonized.
Sometimes literally.
Yes. And so that, again, that's where we're at in terms of, because these things mean different things to different people. And a bit, you talked about social.
You can also see that through how the media has been portraying mental health over the last few years, and you kind of see it being portrayed in one and two camps. Obviously, it's complex, so there's varieties. But more obvious examples are you've got the demonisation of things like DID and Split, things like that's a very famous film. But also in that same vein, the later films treat them as like superpowers.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yes.
thing. Other examples like you gave earlier, James, of autism being like the genius who can't communicate,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You see plenty of examples of that.
We got the
throughout media.
BBC Sherlock, didn't we? And also
Yeah.
David Sheldon, Keeper of the Big Bang Theory. We got
Yeah.
these
Yes.
kind of really
Autism
big
being-
figures in modern culture who were quirky or divergent. And it was really helpful in a way to see someone who's
Yeah.
labelable as a
Positive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is not the same thing, but feeds into this neurodivergent thing.
Yes.
Oh, it sounds terrible. This neurodivergent thing. What's that? No, I don't mean that at all. I mean, I think my sense of that is that that's like a positive development. If it's recognizing that there is not one standard way of thinking and approaching life, and not one standard personality type that's the right personality type. So we were doing
Profiled.
we were profiled the other week, weren't we?
I've been
And,
profiled twice.
and we
Not
both came out with a profile that, whilst of course all profiles are equal, some profiles are more equal than others, and some profiles are frankly less equal than others. And I think it's fair to say that
we still love you and accept.
yeah. Yeah. But the fact, so I think it's fair to say that our profiles were the bad profiles.
Yeah.
So we were the ones that got compared to Donald Trump, which I felt was harsh.
That's hard to make that neutral, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. That's not a neutral comparison, is it? So, but it was, we were laughing about it. But that sense of when you do this profiling, that it's hard to get away from a sense that the right human being is someone who's a little bit extrovert, but not too extrovert. But that's annoying.
Yes.
Introverts are basically a bit weird,
Yes.
and who does this and that and the other, and ticks these boxes, has a certain number of friends, but not too, you know what I mean? There's a right number for everything. So if the neurodivergent is saying, well, actually, I'm not all wired like that. So actually, sometimes you might need to think, I'm not just going to design my space for these people.
Yes.
We're getting away from pointing at everyone and just shouting, be normal.
Yes.
That's really rubbish, because we
Because
don't
we don't
want
know what
one
normal-
kind of person, but
Because-
also we don't know who it is.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get there either.
And being normal is quite culturally oppressive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because most of us
good
go
that
through
we're
most of us
escaping
go
from
most of us go through school thinking that everybody's normal except us.
Yes.
And that basically I think there's about 3 people who think they are normal, but they'll grow out of that. But everybody else knows that they're not normal, but thinks they are. And thinks everybody else is, sorry.
Yeah, and there's one of the things that I like about what one of the psychologists said. He said in their training was learn your theories, understand your models, disregard them when you ever encounter anyone.
Yeah.
Is that because when you encounter someone, and especially for what we believe,
And uniquely made in the image of God.
Yes.
So a unique person individually crafted by God.
yes, and that and that you get those dynamics. So you go like, oh well, is social media having an impact on young people's mental health? Yes.
And older people's mental health.
And older people's mental health. Yes, no, maybe, it depends. And when you deal with the individual, it might go, okay, that person, if once you've analysed everything that's going on, you can say this is having a big impact. The other person, you can go, well, they've had this happen, this happen, this happen. The social media is this kind of drop in the ocean, and by and large, do you know what I mean? We're complex, and I think that's also in terms of how it's really important to approach people is it's just not pigeonhole, even if there is a label that's been given to them or presented with them, to go, oh, okay, but what that means and looks like for you is not going to be the same.
Because that's the other side of the
And what you want to do about
That's
it.
the other side of the neurodivergent labelling thing. It's kind of, it is useful to say, oh, everybody's different. There's lots of different ways of looking at it, but there's still the danger of the label and the limiting, that label is limiter. So to go back to our personality types, it's quite neutral. I'm this person. Is that an excuse for me to say, I just don't need to worry about all that rubbish then? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not, take me or leave me, I'm just like this thing. Whereas actually, if we're all trying to grow as people, to be more and more the people that God's called us to be, to as it were, inhabit the image that we've been given, then we need to be aware of our limitations, but we also need to try and be aware of them in a way which doesn't make them determinative of our identity.
Yeah.
And I say that carefully
And also-
because there's a real balance to that, I think, isn't
And
there?
also, it's culturally what we think, what sins we allow.
Ugh.
In the fact of, if I'm just a bit impatient or a little bit grumpy, people will just say, "Oh, that's just Jim,"
Yeah.
or whatever, or "Oh, that's okay."
Yeah, we've said that.
Yeah.
We have.
Yeah. Whereas there's certain things it's like, "Oh, well, that's in your control to fix.
Yes.
You can
yes.
fix that." And
Yeah.
you're like, no more so than any one of us can
No, actually, the grumpiness would be easier.
fix our greed, our lust, our
Yeah, yeah,
do you know- and therefore that's, if we were probably more gracious and more merciful and more kind to people and their differences and the beauties that bring, then it would completely change.
Well, you know, this brings us back to something conversation we were having last time when we talked about death, sex, and anger. And I'm just trying to get this podcast banned, basically. But you know, the whole sort of late 19th century psychoanalysts, unless you know, it was a lot about sex and anger, because those are the things that you couldn't talk about.
Yes.
It was
Those things are
unacceptable,
culturally repressed.
culturally repressed. Whereas I don't think you could say that sex is culturally repressed, but death isn't talked about, and to openly talk about death can feel quite culturally strange. You know, even I, who is someone who is expected in certain settings to talk about death, it's still, you still feel yourself pushing through some language, and that's so it's not quite the same thing as, but that sense about what's acceptable behaviour, what's acceptable to talk about, what's not acceptable to talk about.
Well, and so this is
Changes,
This is the, and you see if you read the manuals, they are trying to have to wrestle with this. One of it because they're aware that of kind of cultural Western dominance, that this is what it looks like and this is normal human experience and anything outside that is wrong, and go, okay, can you write one manual for what is psychologically okay and not okay, that works in Duffield and works in a village in Uganda?
Yeah.
The answer is, well, maybe no. And one of the ways in which you can deal with this is that you see us doing is the area of kind of schizophrenia, psychosis of hallucinations or visions or dreams and their religious content and how they work out, and trying to navigate what is.
Yeah, so even the basic questions, does a dream come from inside or outside, is contested.
Yeah,
Culturally contested. I mean, in the West, we'd all automatically say inside.
but that was Freud's view.
But that's a Western view. That's not,
Yeah.
and actually probably is historically unusual. That is, I bet if you'd asked most people in the world in the year 1500 or the year 1000 where dreams come from, I suspect most people would have said outside, or at least some of them do.
And so this is going back to the big split. Freud became popular, and most of Freud's view is a large foundational idea.
So this is the, as it were, atheistic, as in
Atheistic.
not necessarily that we don't believe in God, but we're excluding God from the issues here. This is scientific, and this is a closed universe, and God is
the God language is really just
projection.
or just a way of expressing repressed material.
Right. So this is the kind of classic.
So basically, all of our language about God is really sexual repression.
Yeah, so this feeds into the kind of history of religion,
your mother
history of
issues,
religions
father
type issues that, you know.
Yeah.
So you read Robert Graves on Greek myths, and they all basically go back to some female god somewhere.
Well, yeah, and you get this, and I think there is good evidence to suggest, good objective scientific evidence that, and one of the other is that we've all experienced this, is somewhat deja vu. We have dream encounters that come true, or we have encounters that, or ideas and feelings and stuff that come to us that sometimes called synchronicity, that just, they're two completely disconnected events, you know, atheistically speaking, but that happen to us and carry huge weight, huge meaning, huge transformation.
Yeah.
or you're like, how does that?
Well, and also, like, sometimes you have your dream and you think, yeah, I completely understand why I dreamt that last night. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the classic, it's my finals again. The classic stress dream, it's my finals, and somehow I'm back at
Yeah.
university, even though I know I'm 50 and
Yeah.
I haven't done any revision.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically like the first time, really. Quite. But
Just revealing your dreams now, aren't you?
yeah, but you have that stress dream,
Yeah.
or whatever else is, or being out in your pajamas or whatever else it is, and you kind of think, oh yeah, of course I understand why that is. But then you just get stuff where you're like, where did that come from? Why? I mean, I cannot fathom why I dreamt that. I can't think of any examples now, but you're just like, where did that come from?
And so, for example, in cultures historically that were much more open to visions and dreams, if you began to start doing that, normally you'd get put on a pathway to becoming the shaman or the leader in charge.
Yeah, I like the way that you compared priests to witch doctors last time. I was enjoying that comparison.
But if you, in the same way that we talked about, it was interesting. This is because I was studying this obviously whilst going through training to be a priesthood, and everyone was always talking about, have you heard the call?
Yeah.
Have you heard the call? And then you're reading all these things, and you see this actually in the manuals. They go,
have you heard me calling in the night? It's like, well,
well, yeah, there was shit, and you'd see in the manuals, you'd go, unless this is part of a religious kind of event, or unless it wasn't joined with X, Y, and Z of kind of, behavioural issues on top of that or whatever. But then you're into a really tricky territory of culture and influence.
Sorry. So are you saying to me that the manuals might sometimes link the sense of calling with delusion?
Yeah.
Fancy that.
They might. They also don't.
Yeah.
Like they try and not overly dictate that, but yet also have to deal with the fact that the vast majority of people who have mental health psychosis, a lot of the material is religious.
Yeah. So I mean, someone said to me once, I'm sure this is an exaggeration, that if you go into a setting where people have had to be long-term institutionalized, a good proportion of them will tell you that they're the Messiah.
Well, yeah. There's the story of someone sat in bed thinking themselves to be Napoleon, and they say, "I am Napoleon, I'm Napoleon." The doctor goes, "Who told you that you're Napoleon?" And they did. "God did." And the person in the next door bed go, "I did not." Now, we laugh about that, but it's not.
It's not.
It actually is something that happens, and how you navigate that. And again, going back to the beginning of, in order to understand. Okay, so we would use the language of me and God are one, but we understand that within a certain.
Yes. Yeah.
What we understand.
We are not claiming to be God.
But that's also because we've had good theology.
Yeah, so Christ union doesn't mean we become Jesus.
No, but if you put someone under huge stress who's also gone through a number of traumatic events, and they're trying to attempt to articulate that, especially if they're articulating that in not a language that they're common to, you can begin to articulate something very different. Now, how you differentiate that is a massive medical and spiritual theological question.
Yeah, good.
And that's when you get into the real extremes of this area, the trick is the hard.
So where are we? I think what we've been exploring for probably the last 20 minutes or so is just this question of complexity, and I think hopefully we've demonstrated that this is this is complex. This is completely a fundamentally not straightforward area, because it touches the deepest roots of personhood, doesn't it? And therefore, that's going to be tricky to resolve, particularly in the West, where we have generally moved away from the metaphysical. By which I mean that we've generally moved away from thinking in terms of the big questions of the universe and God, however you define him, and all those things. And we often culturally dodge those questions. So, you know, what can't you talk about? You can talk about sex, and you can talk about anger, but you can't talk about death, and you can't talk about God
Yeah.
as anything other than as a sort of personal hobbyist kind of, you know, I go to church, I play football, I paint miniatures, I go for walks. That's fine,
Yeah.
but not God as anything that might be, as anything or anyone who might be in any sense transcendent.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a cancellation of thing. We're just
No,
talking about we don't do religion, we don't do God, we don't do metaphysics. Therefore, we don't do the big questions of life.
And all we do, what we are trying to be, is to become somewhat independent, in control people. Of this idea of this is what it means. And so someone wrote a book called The Schizophrenia Complex, in this idea that when you encounter someone with schizophrenia, it terrifies us.
Because you don't want to be that person.
Because it responds in the same way that if someone walks into the room with a superiority complex, because most people are familiar with that, you know, best in the room, it will elicit in response everyone else's. So certain people will become inferior, and other people, it will make their superior complex
so they
flare up, because they're going to go, well, you're not in charge, I'm in charge, and then you're both rattling out, and the people with the inferiority complex are all kind of,
no, please don't do that.
adding hope because someone else's issues. Our response isn't them; it's also our own stuff. And so when we encounter someone, and this is why the mental health can be such an issue. When we encounter someone with those things, it flares up within us of our own tendencies. You encounter someone with those, you know, compulsive disorders, always doing the same thing. How you want to fix them somewhat just comes out, and therefore understanding that this is not, we are not individuals just living in our own little space that are disconnected to everyone else.
Well, that we are really trying to be, and maybe that's part of what you see.
I think you're saying we're trying to be this. I just, you know, what are we? I don't know that we. I just don't think in the West, in the general culture, we are clearly articulating anything about what we're supposed to be. You can piece something together. You can piece together something about economics is quite important. So our net wealth is quite important. The fact that it's always growing, that's kind of important to human flourishing. In that sense, there's something about freedom, but no one quite knows what that is. There's something about being good, but no one knows quite what that is. There's something about being happy, but no one knows what that is. So, I mean, in one sense, I don't want to reduce it purely to this, but I do, you know, if I'm sitting there thinking, what is going on here? I'm sure one of the reasons why in the West, because this is mostly a West issue, in the West, why there's a big issue around our mental health corporately, and I'm not talking here about diagnosis, I'm just talking about that general sense of well-being. Surely one of the issues is that we don't know what we're here for.
Well, yeah, and this is what the one of the Bible places I love to go to at the minute is Balaam's donkey.
Oh yeah.
So if you're not familiar with the story, read it because it's fascinating. Balaam is a non-Jewish prophet, and he is basically going in a direction that God doesn't want him to go in. And he's riding on a donkey, and the donkey sees a giant angel in front of him, and the donkey stops because this angel has a sword, and the donkey is like, well, I am not going to pass this
Clever donkey.
angel. Clever donkey. Balaam doesn't see the angel and starts beating up the donkey. It happens 3 times, and eventually God opens the mouth of the donkey, and the donkey turns around to Balaam and goes, I've always been good to you.
Why are you beating me?
Why are you beating me?
Can't you see the Jefferson huge?
Can't you see the thing with the massive sword?
Thing with the sword.
I'm saving your life. And I think I think within that we culturally we're in danger of beating up Balaam's donkey, in that we have a whole group of people who we've characterized as mental health because they are seeing the sickness of culture and the direction that we're going in and going, we're going to doom. We have to we have to change how we think about life, meaning, the bigger questions, schooling, education, purpose, all those things that people are falling off, and we're going, oh, well, we need to help you. We need to help you get back on the bus that's going in the direction that we all sat there going, I'm not sure this bus is going in the right
Okay.
place.
That ability to see what the front is. Well, look, I'm tempted. I'm tempted to come on all clocks and say, well, on that bombshell. That seems a good place to stop, actually. And I think that is, where are we? We are complex, but we're complex in a culture which is quite uniquely in human history trying to completely do without God.
Yes. And it's hard.
And that's tricky. Yeah. So we'll come back to this.
If people tuned in for a handful of
helpful tips,
helpful, encouraging actions or sentences, A, you know better than that by now, but B, let's have a go to say something encouraging. So we've talked a lot about what people are like, and it is very like what the Bible describes.
Yeah,
so
I think
that's... feel like these are brand new modern problems and the Bible can't help, but it's exactly what the Bible says we're like.
Yeah, so go to the Psalms, read lots of Psalms. Psalms are all about the reality that, we're trying to live with the reality, not a pretend. So we go to the Psalms. Balaam's Ass, I think, is Numbers 22, something like that. Around to there, in that region. Balaam's Donkey, Balaam's Ass, same thing. So look those things up. Yeah, I mean, I think the Psalms are a lovely place to go. Just for the, I guess, a little bit of permission to not always pretend everything's hunky dory.
Yeah,
but also a resolution that comes in and through God.
Yes, well, Job's a long book, isn't it? Because the world's that big and it's really hard. And God is even bigger, but you have to sit with it for a long time. And that's really hard. Yeah.
The two things that I would say that I think probably might be helpful both people who are struggling or no people who are is similar to what you're saying, is like humility.
Yes.
We're not in control. We're not in, and we don't understand all these things, and we don't encounter the same person twice. And so to have that position of an openness and a trust within God, and then that comes underneath that just to be people that listen, that aren't in a rush, that take these things seriously, that are listening to people in their pain and their suffering, try to understand where they're coming from, and listen to ourselves and how our own responses come from that, and kind of therefore hopefully avoiding snap, easy, quick solutions to the biggest problems that humans face.
Yeah.
I feel like we might come back to this again.
Yeah.
If we've upset or enraged you, let us know. That's really helpful. We'd love to.
Let Adam know.
Yeah, let me know. That's all right.
Because
I'll apologise on Joseph's behalf.
Yeah. Well, and my you know what I mean? Like there's we can be clumsy over this and miss this, and I think we somewhat do this asking for your generosity, that you be generous and listen to us, and if there's something that you're really upset about, at least give us the opportunity to either double down or say no, sorry, there was a better way of rephrasing.
We probably didn't mean it, and if we did, we'd at least like to know that we've upset you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time.